We're gonna change the tires on a V-Star 1100. Just to make sure I didn't do anything stupid, I put an R with an arrow going this way for right side forward. And I also put an R on the back right here. First thing we had to do is put the bike on jacks, so the center is exactly right there.
Right. Index finger.
On the left side of the bike. And on the left side of the bike, the frame is lower on the front, so we had to use a wood shim on the back. Now we're on the right side of the bike. We had to shim up 2 beer cans on the jack.
Ready? I'm gonna do this.
Alright, here's the taking apart order, official manual of the rear tire assembly. Now we're going to remove the brake caliper bracket bolt. There's one on the top and there's 2 on the side. So now we're removing the brake caliper assembly after the 3 bolts have been removed. Number 2, release the 4 bolts holding the wheel onto the frame. And number 3 is to release the rear axle bolt and washer. Now on the right hand side of the bike, we're going to release 2 rear end axle nuts and holder. Now he just took the whole rear axle assembly out with the nut and the washer on the end. So they just pulled the drive shaft off the bike. Looks like it's an enclosed deal, and that's what it looks like underneath. There's a little floating doohickey in there. So we just released the air from the tire. Make sure you use a pallet where you're not compressing the rotor on the ground.
No way to pop the bead off.
Pop the bead.
We'll get closer.
Pop the bead.
Let's do another one. Remember, small bites.
We're going to pop the bead on the rotor side of the tire right now. There it goes. Now we're going to silicone the rim.
Yeah.
So now we took a thin piece of rubber and we tucked it between the rim and the tire, and we're going to pry it apart. The rubber will protect the rim. Now this has spokes, so it has a tube where we have to take the valve stem off to get to the tube.
Between it.
Our stem valve that we took out.
I think at 3/8.
Now we're just pulling the tube out.
Try to fill this with air and
Gonna make sure we didn't poke it with screwdrivers. Now that one side is gone, we're gonna stick the rubber pad in and shove it through to the other side. Get it off of that rim. The new tire going on.
again.
Make sure your pre-marked arrow on the rim is going the same direction as your arrow on the tire. And now we're gonna thread it back into the tire, making sure the stem is facing what, this way? This way towards the open face, opposite of the rotor. Threading the stem back towards the little hole. And stuck it back through the deflated tube right now. We're gonna squeeze the other side back up. Pinch the outside rim and the inside now. We aired up the tire.
Okay, just put it up to 50 pounds.
Halfway, we bounced it around, make sure the tube wasn't twisted, and then we aired it up. It's about 40, and then we heard the sides pop into place. No tube sticking out, tires set. Now we're going to tighten up our stem.
It's supposed to be a metric one.
Okay, we're putting the axle back in the wheel temporarily. We're going to balance the tire. We're balancing wheels right now. We just let the wheel go. Okay, we just let the tire come to a rest, and we're gonna make a mark right on top.
Like this.
Okay, we got our self-adhesive things, but we are gonna test them by using electrical tape. This is where the light part was, heavy part at the bottom. So to fix it, we had to put on a spoke weight and then also 3 of these rim weights. And as you can see now, when you bring it off center, the tire stays where it should. Alfredo just took this cap off of the top of this.
See that little clip right here?
Always a good time to get more of these when you do brakes.
See these come out. These pins.
Which then pull out like so. And the brakes come right out. Here's our new aftermarket brake pads. We're going
You
to
need a brake pads, man.
put back.
Take it in.
We just collapse the piston.
Like Jesus clips.
We threw back our piston. So it goes through the hole under the metal bracket clip there. Pins in, going this direction, and we're going to put our clips in where are those holes. And here's the original cover that he took off to begin the process. He's going to put it back on. Use some brake clean. Make sure you clean your rotor. Okay, we got here some grease for the end of the drive shaft. We're using DuraBlend. Okay, we got our drive shaft going back on.
There you go.
We're going back in.
I'm gonna go in that hole.
Drive shaft hole is right in there.
A little bit more.
We just stuck the axle back in.
I'm not pushing it all the way in because it's got to. I'm gonna bring it, raise it up, and put it onto here.
Okay, special note, when pushing the wheel on, make sure this arm here is forked between this part, because if it's too high or too low, you got to pull the tire off and reset it again. And of course, make sure your brake calipers are above, otherwise you won't be able to pull them up to your rotor. Okay, so we just seated that bolt tight against the frame right there, and now Freighter's going to put on our locking mechanism to keep it there, and our bolts.
Put one in now.
Left side of the bike, Alfredo just put on a washer and a nut, and we're putting back on our 4 bolts. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 down there. Now we're going to put in our top bolt that holds the that swinging thing to the frame. Then we're going to put in our caliper bolts right there. Next, we're going to take off the front wheel, replace it, as well as the brake calipers. And these are the directions to do that. First thing we're going to do is take off the brake calipers.
So you shouldn't thread off.
There's our brake caliper
Slowly, not
disconnected. And number 2 is we just loosened this front axle pitch bolt. That's what you loosen next. Number 3, we're taking out the axle assembly.
Hey Dave, take the bike up, please.
You pulled the axle out, and there's the tire released.
Spacers.
Spacers. What this is doing is breaking the seal. Make sure you spray it with silicone. And make sure you always do it towards where the stem is. There's a stem right there, so we don't break it off. We now have one side released from the rim. Next, we are pulling the tube out of the tire. Releasing the stem first. Inflate our tube to make sure there's no leaks. Upon inspection of our inner tube, we discovered that there's a little nick in the tube, so we're going to patch it. While we're patching our tube, we're going to take the wheel off of the existing rim on the other end. And there it is.
You just have to make sure it's the right way when we put it on.
Right.
This one doesn't need to be right or left because it's a symmetrical rim.
Right, because you could spin it around.
We just threaded the tube in. Last thing to go in was the nipple stem right there. We just threaded the nut on to keep it secure. There's the stem. We're starting on the opposite end,
right now.
putting the last side of the tire into the rim.
Okay, first spray. Bike right here, man, right here.
Now we check to make sure the tube isn't pinched or hanging out of the tire on either side. We're airing up the front tire at 33 psi. We put a cap there to protect the threads on the metal. Checking for balance right now. Yeah, the tire moves slightly on one end. Got to use brake cleaner on the rim so that the weight will attach to the rim. So where that white mark was is our light spot, so we just put our weight right there. And here's the brake assembly for the front, left. We got some aftermarket brake pads to do this as well. $35.
Oh, changing both front pads too? How bad are they? Pretty thin? Yeah, they're down there.
So we just stuck a screwdriver in.
To expand the pistons back into the caliper.
When my brakes were worn out, this reservoir was pretty much empty, and now that we've forced back the calipers, the brake fluid has risen to fill up my reservoirs once again.
It's like what it was like that. Thanks, Dave.
And then that thing just flipped over it.
So I'm gonna put it back in reverse order.
They're selling out for the advertising. That's not right.
What's that?
James Bond.
Which one is he?
His drink of choice now is Heineken.
Did you collapse the pistons?
Yes.
Throwing the tire back on there. We're going to put the spacers on the tire, greasing it up a little bit. Our spacers are in.
I'm ask you to.
We're putting in the axle bolts with the torque wrench of 43 foot-pounds. Now it's taking our calipers and shoving them back on the disc. There's one there and one there. Taking the left side brake caliper now. Threading it onto the disc.
This part's easy. See, to take the brake pads off only, without taking the tire, you just take these two bolts off.
And that's it.
That's it, and this thing comes off and the brake pads are replaced.
And they just fall out, right?
Right.
We also did the rear gear oil, which all that consisted of is taking that bolt off and this bolt off down here. And we drained it. And then this is our fill bolt as well as our level bolt when the oil is level. And we used some 80-90 oil. And it looks like this one whole full can did it just about perfect. I'm glad it did because I didn't have any more.